The impact of tree thickening or encroachment on sustainable pastoral environmental values is hard to define. It is slow-moving deterioration, often seen as multi-generational. In that respect, tree thickening can be seen as a productivity and environmental debt we are placing on future generations. While the culprits of tree thickening are often thought of as the acacias such as gidgee and mulga, eucalypts can also be a problem. The House family owns and runs Fortuna Station in the Desert Uplands.
So my name's Nina House. I'm a beef producer on Fortuna here in the Desert Uplands in central Western Queensland. So we're running a breeder operation, mainly Brahman cross cattle of about 1,000 breeders, turning off mainly our young stock.
The Desert Uplands is a region of roughly 75,000 square kilometres, lying from Blackall to Charters Towers, swinging west through Muttaburra.
So one of the main impacts we're seeing with tree thickening is a loss of biodiversity, particularly in your grasses and your forbs and your shrubberies. We're finding that the trees are impacting on their ability to grow. And as a result, we're losing that ground cover, and which is having other impacts like increased erosion or compacted soils. So in terms of overcoming the impact on the increasing trees, we are managing it through rotational grazing and spelling. We're seeing thickening across most of the species, but in particular the yellowjack, ironbark and box country.
The encroachment of these trees is affecting enterprise viability by reducing pasture species.
We've also seen, less of the different forbs and grasses that you usually find around the trees because of the competition and reducing the sunlight. Yeah, there's just the less plants there. And so that's obviously going to contribute for us running less stock or putting on less kgs of those stock.
Changes in property management over past decades through removal of sheep and changes in vegetation legislation have aided tree thickening.
Originally, we would have gotten a tree clearing or a tree thinning permit to indicate reducing the number of stems per acre, per hectare. But with the latest regulations, that's obviously proving more difficult. So we have gone to more changing our grazing management. So we're rotating our cattle through the paddocks, so giving the paddocks more rest, particularly over the wet season. So we are seeing that is working, but it has taken a long time. So we've been rotating probably nearly 20 years now, and it's not been since the last sort of 4 or 5 years that we're actually seeing a big effect. Obviously, the droughts we've had in between times and fires have had an impact, but we're slowly seeing a diversity of species coming back again.
The House family has found that rotational grazing is working, with concentrated stocking for short periods of time, improving grass species biodiversity and the reduction of viable tree saplings.
So we have 2 main breeder mobs of around 300 head, and so we're rotating them through a certain set number of paddocks. So our aim is every time we want to do a management practice, like whether we want to brand or whether we want to wean or preg test, then we'll bring the cattle through the yards and then put them out into fresh paddocks. So probably, and depending on the size of the paddock too, we keep an eye on what the feed's looking. So if we're thinking that they have eaten it down a bit, then we'll move them on to the next paddock. Each paddock will get a wet season spell at least every second year. We do find this process though takes a long time. It takes at least 10, 15 years to have an impact, and we find that, if we could have the ability, say, to clear the trees, then the positivities from this would be a lot shorter. So we'd see good results within 2 or 3 years.
Nina House doesn't consider Fortuna has a silver bullet in controlling tree thickening, but she believes that grazing management is helping in maintaining pasture species, biodiversity and sustainable grazing in the long term. Industry, government and Desert Channels Queensland support the grazing industry in managing for change and a sustainable future on the rangelands.